Hello, people. This is Founderly Room with Fantasy Grounds College. Here today to do something a little different. Thought I'd work on a little bit of lore, how to use Fantasy Grounds Unity as a storytelling tool and not just a game, and also to create some content for an upcoming series that I want to produce that will involve some of the events that lead up to and maybe even after Lost Mine of Phandelver. So this shouldn't contain too many spoilers for those who haven't played the module. I am pretty sure by now most of you have seen the module, have played it, have run it, or have read about it. But there are some things that I was always curious about. And one of them in this topic will be what happened to Sildar Hallwinter and his friend Gundren Rockseeker. These are your patrons that hired you to go to Phandalin. They hired you to escort a wagon full of goods. However, along the way, they were waylaid by the goblins, who end up ambushing players later on in the adventure. But I want to know how that took place, why it took place, where it took place, and the things that it would take to recreate that scene. So what I've done is taken some lore off the internet. I've taken some third-party content, and as well as the original Lost Mine of Phandelver module, and loaded those up in my library. And we're just going to kind of go through some of the things that you can do with Fantasy Grounds, all the while talking about the story. So when you're building content, you want to have the mood, the story, the ambition, the patience, all those things to keep that adventure alive. Otherwise, you're going to get burned out, get kind of tired of it, and just go through the motions. We don't want that, especially as a game master, because you're going to suffer through that for potentially a few months to a year. So you kind of want to make the adventure your own. And I think part of the burnout is that if you've run a module a couple times, it really gets monotonous. And when it becomes a chore or no longer fun, or the story is kind of repeated itself, I think that's part of the illusion that DMs have to keep up, that they're happy and that they are, well, not necessarily happy, but they're involved with the story. So to keep that illusion alive, you at least got to like what you're doing. So what I'm hoping to do is point out some storytelling elements, some ways to make this funner, and to get your mind wrapped around the idea of just telling stories and not just running a game. So I think it's important that we, as game masters and as developers, that we remember how that is supposed to go, and remember that's the heart of it. I think we get wrapped up in the mechanics and extensions and modules, and we don't really think about the actual story as much as we should. I think a majority of us get too wrapped up in the technology and the things that go into doing these games. Now, I'm not saying those aren't important, because obviously they're very important, but one of the things I think that suffers is the story. And I too suffer from this as I get too wrapped up into the content and the as far as the how does this work, and where do I do with this, and where is this going, and those sort of things kind of make people not so happy about running adventures, and it's kind of a turnoff, to be honest. So I'm going to go through some of this Lost Mine of Phandelver extras. So I don't really want to go through the module, but we will mention some of those along the way during the content creation. I think that it's important that you guys have an idea of how to kind of get something started, and to make this more of an enjoyable journey for you, instead of just just a mechanical kind of robotic process. So what I've done here is I've taken some images on the internet, kind of meshed them together, and I made this poster. So this is kind of like a mood thing, and then I threw on a mist effect. Basically, it's getting dark, the sun is going down. Over to the right here is the Sword Coast. These guys are actually looking north. They heard some noises. They're kind of looking around. And this is right before they get ambushed by the goblins on the way to Phandalin. They're both kind of looking around. The horses are restless. They're they're really anxious to see what's going on. So one of the things I want to do is create these two as player characters instead of NPCs. So I'll use their NPC stat blocks as reference. And then as far as the horses go, they get killed in this adventure. So I want to stat those out and kind of see what that looks like too, because they're obviously victims in this assault by the goblins. And I really don't like animals getting killed. So, I'd really like to see those pesky goblins get defeated in the adventure. So it gives me more passion and compassion towards the horses. I mean, who wants to kill horses, right? Except for nasty little goblins with black arrows. So we'll see how that plays out. I do want to make sure one of the horses gets a lick in, though, before they get killed. I'd like to see one of the goblins get hooved or trampled or something, because I really like horses. I hate to see them go down in battle, but it's a reality of war, I guess. The other thing is the relationship between these two. I mean, is it strained? Are they actually friends? Are they kind of put together on purpose? Or what's going on with those two? Where were these horses raised? Where were they part of the adventure and they're just horses? Or do they actually have personalities? Those sort of things. I realize that's getting a little deep into the story, but if you as the game master have these things in mind, when you go to run the adventure, it is something that you want to keep in mind and kind of play into, because if someone asks you about the horses, they're just horses. Well, you could say this is a pony and this is a riding horse, and you can even get into the breed of horse. And if you get into the equestrian part of it, there are people out there that are really into horses. So if you can play into that, it helps them with immersion in the story. And not to mention the environment. I mean, you got forests, you have all these. Right now I got a mist effect going on. That's just a light mist that's rolling in. It might get a little foggy in the evening. I imagine that it is late summer, early fall, and these are like the first times when the actual fog is forming and coming into the Sword Coast area. So they're both standing on the high road looking north. And to their left, if you were facing the direction they're facing, this is the Sword Coast, and the sun's going down. And like I said, Gundren here has a candle-like thing mounted to his helmet for mining. And then he's got something in his hand, looks like a flask or something. And then he's got his pickaxe here. So I think I'm going to give him basically like maybe leather armor. I can't tell what he has, maybe padded. Doesn't look very robust. And then he's going to have a pick. And then maybe he'll have a little dagger or something like that. And he's got this water skin. Then I'm looking at Sildar's got like a long sword and a helm and some armor. Now look at their stats. The stat blocks don't actually match anything like the descriptions that they give you. So they kind of give you a free rein as to how you want to develop these two. I got some products for people who've done that, and these are on the DM's Guild. Like Grim Press has put out a couple things, and there's others who've done other content, such as the maps that go with the actual module, which are really cool. And then there's a lot of other stuff that you can get on your own. So without further ado, I think I'm going to minimize this. But up here on the top, if you are in Fantasy Grounds, on the very top right, let me get my pointer back out because I don't want to point at things and you can't see it. That kind of sucks. So I'm going to get the pointer focus out here, and this kind of gives you a better visual here of what I'm talking about. So up here on the top right of the interface, there's a little arrow. If you click down, that kind of makes it like a theater mode kind of background image. And then if you click the down arrow again, it turns it back into the modular view. But when you have it in this is more like an embedded view. And then when you're trying to show Fantasy Grounds and not just the dice and the mechanics, you want to show the images, you click that, it pretty much takes over. So if you had a big map that you're using, this would show really well on a stream. And you do that occasionally. You can't necessarily do it throughout the whole adventure, but for some of it, that'd be cool. So that little arrow key up there is tricky. It's something that most people don't use, but I think it's a cool feature. It wasn't that new when it came out with Classic, so this was part of Fantasy Grounds Classic too. So it's fairly new for the community. It's only about a year old or so, but maybe a year and a half, but it is fairly new. So I'm going to close the picture here, and I have it also as a backdrop. So, we don't lose anything in that. And this looks pretty good. It looks a lot better at this resolution anyways, because that's what it was created for. So this is just for lore and such. If you're just tuning in, I'm going to do a segment here about lore that has to do with Lost Mine and Phandelver, just more story driven. But as I'm doing that, I'm going to show you how I'm creating content and how to piece this stuff together. So what I've done is started creating my own chapters in story format. So I went to the story entries over here on the right, and I created a group called Hallwinter and Rockseeker. Not to be mistaken for Daryl Hall and John Oates. This is this is Sildar Hallwinter and Gundren Rockseeker. I was thinking of Daryl Hallwinter and Rockseeker Oates or something like that, because you have Hall and Oates. So anyways, forget the reference to the 80s pop icons. But anyhow, so that it ages me anyway. So put this over here. I got the arrow key. And what I'm doing here is collecting information about the Rockseekers themselves. So Gundren here is one of the brothers of 3. And he's friends to Sildar, and Sildar apparently is a member of the Lord's Alliance. So when we work on Sildar, we want to look up that. But the history was that the dwarf and his brothers located the Wave Echo Cave, which is one of the main focal points of Lost Mines of Phandelver. It's a legendary home of the Forge of Spells. He excitedly rushed back to Neverwinter to gather supplies and gear and hire a party of adventurers, aka Lost Mine of Phandelver, to haul the equipment to Phandalin. However, Nesnar, which is the big baddie, under the guise of the Black Spider, which is his alias, sent orders to King Groll of the Cragmaw tribe. Now, the Cragmaw tribe is a bunch of goblinoids minus orcs. So there's hobgoblins, bugbears, and goblins. And I'm working on that section as well for those types of individuals. So he hires them to have the pair waylaid by those of the Cragmaw hideout. So the Cragmaw hideout's close to the road, or kind of close, so it lends itself to that. King Groll ordered Clarg, the chieftain of the hideout, to have his minions carry this mission out. So King Groll is the leader, but Clarg works for him. And Clark runs that goblin hideout that's not too far from the Triboar Trail. Gundren and Sildar rode 2 horses. There we go, the 2 horses. Across the high road, but were ambushed and captured by the Cragmaw tribe. And Gundren was taken to King Groll of Cragmaw Castle. So when they're ambushed and taken, they take Gundren to the hideout, and they take Sildar to the actual castle. So they split these 2 up. So they take them to Groll to Cragmaw Castle. They lose the map to the mine in the process. So they had a map on them, and that's why when you go to the first part of the adventure, you see an empty scroll case. So the Black Spider sends out a doppelganger, Virith, to fetch the dwarf and his map. However, Groll, the king, did not wish to do so without making some kind of coin in the process. So he's looking for money to lend out his resources and such. So later, Gundren became free, along with his brother Nundro, and that administrated the mine. So these are some of the events that are up and around leading to and after the actual adventure. Thardrin Rockseeker is one of the brothers, and supposedly he had a pair of boots of springing and striding, or striding and springing. So I actually linked the item to the story entry, so when I want to bring that up later on in adventure. If I want to create a character for him or an NPC, I have that right there. Talks about his history a little bit, his relationship with his brothers, and it's very vague, so there's a lot of room for if you want to add anything. And then Nundro, he was also there. He was the youngest of the three brothers. So you have Thardrin, you have Gundren, and you have Nundro, and they are all brothers. So Nundro and his brothers planned to reopen the Lost Mine near Phandalin. After finding its location, the dwarf was captured by Nesnar, circa 1491 DR, and thrown in a jail in Wave Echo Cave. Nesnar believed that the dwarf knew more information than he initially let on, so he spared him. He was interrogated by his drow captor a couple times per day. After his capture, a doppelganger, one of the bad guys, would assume his form to add leverage to the demands of Nesnar. So Nesnar uses this crazy doppelganger to look like Nundro, and basically sends him off into his bidding. So that's a really interesting thing. So you have a doppelganger in the mix too. So Nesnar is kind of a crafty little drow, obviously. And there are stories about him as well. So you could really get into this whole Lost Mine of Phandelver and even the aftermath. There's a lot of content on the DM's Guild that's similar to what I'm doing now, and it's a lot of speculation and community interpretation, and people have adopted their own stories. So something that you could do before you start running a module like Lost Mine is really kind of getting into who these people are and what they did before they met the adventurers. Why did they hire the adventurers? And then once they leave town, they get about halfway to, or maybe 3/4 of the way to Phandalin right before they're getting ready to turn on the road, and they're attacked by goblins. And it's not just a goblin either. There's a encounter that I'm creating for this particular event. And if I go to my encounter section, I have my own group that I called the Fall of Hallwinter and Rockseeker. And I call it the Tribor Trail Assault, because it's really what it is. It's just total straight up assault ambush. So the goblin ambush that takes place in the module is just 4 goblins. Well, I still have the 4 goblins, but I broke them up into 2 archers and 2 melee goblins. That's based on the events that happen right after this. Is basically the 4 goblins are sent back to the trail to watch and to ambush, because they find out that the adventurers were hired. So it isn't just a mistake or an accident. The goblins know the adventurers are coming. So obviously they somehow got the information out of Hildar or Gundren. So maybe they blackmailed them or tortured them or whatever they did to get the information. That's basically how the goblins know to set up this ambush. And then Clark here is their leader. And he has a liking for wolves, so he has these 3 pet wolves that he takes out for a walk. So he's carrying a chain with these 3 wolves attached to it. And once they get out in the wilderness, he lets them run around. So he just unleashes them and lets them wander around all night. And then when they feel like coming home, they'll wander back to the cave. So you have 4 goblins and Clark, and then 3 wolves against Gundren and Sildar and the 2 horses. So that's basically what I'm going to lead up to in this, is basically setting up a combat where we'll have the assault take place. I'm going to have a map or a battle map of some sort. And then each one of these tokens, I'm going to replace them with some really nice top-down tokens. So I'm going to use the token tool that I showed in another episode, where I'm actually going to take and use some goblin and put them on bases. Same thing with the wolves, and I'll find a cool-looking bugbear for Clark. And then once I've done that, they're going to go in my assets library. And in this case, you want to go to tokens. And then I'll create a folder for those. So if I go back into the folder section and I open that up. Right now there's no tokens in here, but I'm going to make a folder in here, a subfolder called NPC, just NPC. There we go, just NPCs plural. And that'll be my subfolder where I'm actually going to put the tokens once I'm done editing them. And then if you hit this refresh button, once you actually put content in there, it will show a campaign folder. So right now it's not going to show it because all I did was make a subfolder. I didn't put any tokens in there. But that's how you'd add those assets. And then later on, you would assign them to this group. So I'm going to go ahead and start building some of those tokens, but I wanted you to see what I'm working on. And then the next thing here is the Goblinoids of the area. So I did some research of the region that they're in, and there's the Sword Mountains, which are, to the south, and that's where Phandalin is basically set in the foothills. So I looked up that there was, in fact, an Orc Invasion that happened when Wave Echo Cave was in operation and such. And the last clan that was actually together, or a unified front, was the Black Claw clan. And they were formed by a brotherhood called the Scarlet Scourge. So this was in 1026 DR, so this is, 70 years or almost 60 some odd years before Lost Mine. But there was an attack on Waterdeep, and the orcs had attacked 3-4 different times, and they were all of them were quelled, but I needed to understand the politics and the reason why things are the way they are. And that was before Waterdeep was a city. It was actually just a fort. So it was called the Free City of Waterdeep. The last big battle was carried out in massive raids from the orcs back then. And they swept through that area, and one of the places they hit up along the way was the mines. So the Lost Mine was it was when it was still kicking and it was going. There's a bit of lore history there where some human spellcasters helped the orcs destroy take over or try to take over the mine. Then you had some humans that were helping some clerics or something like that helping, and some gnomes and some dwarven clans. So these are the things I want to know about. So that's why I'm doing this research. So far I found out that the orcs kind of ruled the area, and then once they died down, they kind of scattered. And then the rise of the Cragmaw goblins came right after that, or right during that time. And they're basically a tribe of goblins, bugbears, and hobgoblins. And they operate right around the south end of the Neverwinter Wood and along the Triboard Trail. That's where they do all the raiding. So I've linked the goblins themselves, just a basic stat block here. So if I need to work on that, I have it. And here's Clark's wolves, which I have them listed as his pets. Says the members of the tribe sharpen their teeth, so that's why they kind of have that name, which led to the name of the tribe. King Groll ruled the tribe as a whole from the Cragmaw Castle, while Clark led a smaller group from the Cragmaw hideout. So this is kind of like their hierarchy of how they do things. The Cragmaws were eventually hired by Nesnar the Drow to capture Gundren Rockseeker in the year of the Scarlet Witch, which is 1491 DR. So the module takes place in 1491, according to lore and canon. It could also have been 10 years before, because the module states the eruption of Mount Hotnow, so that's basically kind of conflicts with that. So I guess Ed Greenwood made a decision that the Lost Mine actually takes place in 1491. So you guys can argue that. I don't really care about the year so much, as long as it kind of fits in the pocket. But the Cragmaws were hired. King Groll is the leader, and he's a big bugbear, and he's part of that operation. So he's hanging out and stationed in Cragmaw Castle. Clark is the lieutenant, and he basically hangs out in the Cragmaw hideout. So that's their little outpost. So that's where they operate from. So Clark is basically another Goblinoid humanoid type thing. He is a brute, so he's a bugbear as well, and he's kind of like the right-hand man of King Groll. So he's pretty vicious. He's got a morning star, some javelins that he can throw. He's sneaky. He's got this brutal attack, and he's kind of tough. I mean, he's only has so many hit points, but I mean, you could change that for your adventure if you wanted. But he has hide armor and a shield, so that's pretty cool. So he's not bad, and then there's some lore about bugbears on the back of here, and if you have the content, they'll show this photo here. So this is kind of a good way to get into the lore. So you're going to pop through these entries and look on the other tab, and it gives you an idea of just the basics of their ecology, and then a picture too to go with it. So it's kind of cool to have all that, especially if you have the content, or you can make your own. It's up to you. Yo, Drake, what's going on? So basically, this is the preamble to the actual adventure, or this happens the night before when this big fight happens. The way they make it sound is like really not that detailed. It just kind of seems like they were pushed over and the goblins overwhelmed them and they took them. May not have happened that way. It might have been a pretty good battle. So I'm going to make characters based on that. So I will make Gundren and Hildar characters, and I'll probably take the two brothers and make them sidekicks. So if you're familiar with the new Tasha's material, you can make sidekicks that are basically player characters now instead of just NPCs. The D&D Essentials goes over that. So if you want to make them NPCs, you can. I want to make them characters just in case you want to run this as a party, as a group. And they're not going to be very high level. I think Sildar's going to be like 3rd. Gundren's going to be 1st or 2nd level, and his brothers as well. So it's really not overpowered party. The only thing you're missing there probably is a little bit of magic, but other than that, I mean, you'll have your basis of your characters, and you can actually make, depending on the brothers, you can make them into subclasses or a little different, or that you can appeal to their dwarven heritage, however you want to do it. But I think each brother might be a little different. So one of them might be a warrior, one of them might be a rogue, one of them may be a healer, something like that. So you can kind of break it up like that. I'm not sure which direction I want to go with the dwarves yet, but obviously Sildar is a retired soldier, so that's his background. So we'll see what that looks like. But for the time being, I'm going to use the tool that I set aside for creating these tokens. So I want to make a little bit nicer tokens for the presentation of it. Right now, you have the generic ones. They're not bad. I mean, they look okay. I just want my own. So when you put them on a map or an image, you kind of want them to stand out. And that's why people use pogs, because they stand out against a map. So if you have a map and you want to look at something like that, there's some maps in the monster manual. There's some, not necessarily the monster manual, but anything that has an image, you can use that as a map. Let's see if I can go to, here's some backgrounds. Well, I have Lost Mine. Let's look at that. So the artwork from Lost Mine. Let's see if that's available. Yep. I always use this in the Game Master classes. So if you've taken my classes, you'll know what I'm saying. So this is a Triboar Trail image. And I think that this image kind of encapsulates the entire encounter. So I will reuse this image or something like it, because it really does capture the feel of the adventure. And I really like that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so I'm going to create some content. I'll put the music back on a little bit so it's not so boring. And then as I'm building, I'm definitely welcoming comments and stuff. Yeah, even a horse gets killed. Yeah, I don't like that. You have them in the fight too, of course, yes. The goblins get the jump. Yep, that's absolutely right, Drake. The goblins kick butt if they get the jump on the party. So basically, this image, I really like it. It just really makes me feel like this is part of the adventure. Whoever drew this or whoever thought about commissioning this was right on. So In order to use this image, I'm going to unlock it and add a grid to it. So it's not really a battle map, but I want to make a grid. So I'll make it like 60 by 60, just so I can see it better. I'm getting old. And then you can change the color because it's kind of thick and obnoxious. So I'm going to go to the color picker and check out the different brightnesses here. Yeah, I want it kind of bright, like a neon. And then I'm going to turn it down a little bit so it's not so obnoxious. And then hit OK. So that is something I definitely would use in the adventure. This is what I would normally use if I don't have a map. Is some kind of photo that's immersive, but you kind of get the theater of the mind thing going on. And then I would link the encounter to it if I was going to, use this image. I'm just going to do this temporarily till I get the other map set up. So I want to look at this group, see what they look like. So I'm going to send the encounter to the combat tracker. That's quite a large encounter. So normally I'd probably break this up into waves. So I'd probably have the goblins going in 2 groups. And I'd probably have Clarg and his minions in another group. So this is actually a really large encounter. So if I was going to be playing this at a table, I would definitely break this up into 2, maybe 3 groups. You don't want this big of a... This isn't too bad. You have under 10 people here, but when you get beyond 10 groups of people plus the adventures, it's really hard to run it. So you want to do it in steps, like in waves. That way it doesn't get to be too overwhelming, and you're not scrolling up and down on that combat tracker for hours. Anyone who runs Fantasy Grounds knows what I'm talking about. When this encounter going to take place, yes, I'm going to do that. What is the whole CR of that large group? Okay, so the large encounter here, the CR level is 3. So if you take Gundren, who's 3rd level, and or excuse me, 2nd level, and then you take Sildar, who's about 3rd, they're no match for this group. So they're obviously going to be overwhelmed. So I'm going to run this whole thing, and with the lighting when that comes out, and make it like a combat beforehand, and that would make it so that we can run the thing and show everyone how this works. I might get a couple helpers. I was talking to Garner and a couple others, maybe Lady Shell, maybe even you, Drake, and have you help me run the encounter and explain it as we go. But this would be a good opportunity to add to the lore before you play, right before you play the game. You could do something like this, or a simulation, just to see how it works. So now that I have these guys on the combat tracker, I'm going to drag and drop the entire crew onto the map just to show you the tokens. So you do that by grabbing down at the very bottom edge of the combat tracker. There's 3 groups. There's friendly, neutral, and hostile. So those aren't just decorations, those are shortcuts. So you can actually drag the red one, which is the enemies, and you put them on the combat tracker. Now, right now, they're not visible, and they're not visible on the combat tracker, but I can change the eyeball up here on the top left of the combat tracker, and that will show me the tokens and such. So these are the tokens, basically. You have the goblins themselves, which I'm going to have 2 different ones. I'm going to have goblins with bows and then goblins with swords. And then there's the wolves. So that will just be 1 token, basically, to replace. And then there's the Goblinoid, the Clarg. So he is a bugbear, so I can find a bugbear. So instead of just 3 tokens, I think I'm going to use 4. So that just gives you an idea of what these tokens look like. So they're not bad. I mean, pogs show up really well if you look at the map. And when you use the top-down ones, they kind of wash out. So you have to really be careful with, using the top-down token. So that's why I want to put a base on them. That way they're not hidden or blending in with the background as much. I got this from Digital Dave. He was using his tokens with a base because he said the same thing. It was just too hard to see them on the map. So he actually gave me his little PNG file for the base. It's just a square base that's transparent. It's got kind of a roundish look to it. You can change the opacity so you can still see the ground underneath it. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to make the tokens for that to kind of spruce this up. But this is the typical type tokens that you would get with the adventure, which aren't bad. I mean, you can see them really well against the background, which is the intent of using pogs. So that's not too bad, but I'm going to use some fancy smancy 3D ones. If you have line of sight and they get dropped into line of sight that you don't want, you can shift drag, yeah, so that not expose your line of sight. Yeah, I gotcha. I have not tried this with all of them yet, but it works well one at a time, or moving a token on a map. Okay, cool. That works. Good to know. Yeah, very dangerous, not deadly. Breaking it up will help for sure. I want to play the goblins. You could actually. That'd be a lot of fun because you're there to defeat the bad guys. The idea is not to kill them, but we can say it's all non-lethal damage and just still play it out. That'd be a lot of fun. Okay, so now what we'll do is, yeah, Drake, if you want to play the goblins, that might be something. But I'm going to make the tokens first, so I need to go to my hard drive and get into my other programs. So let me go into the token tool. So this is a third-party tool that is put out by RP Tools. I think they're more in cahoots with one of the other virtual tabletops. I want to say, I don't remember which one, probably Roll20 or something like that, but that's probably because a lot of the users at the time were using it. And then the other tool that we use, the Roll Advantage Token Stamp, is in cahoots with either Astral or Foundry, I believe. But nonetheless, you know, they're just tools that you can use online. They're free. They're not too hard to figure out how to use them. So this is called Token Tool, and it's put out by RP Tools. So as you can see, I already have this not bugbear, but this is the null. So I'm going to change the token. This is the base I'm using, and right now it's set to 150 by 150. So normally a base would be around a 100 by 100. I thought that was a little small, so I increased the size of it. And then you can change the opacity so you can almost make it invisible. So I usually go about 3/4 of the way so I can still see underneath the ground. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the portrait photo. In this case, this is not really a portrait, but I'm going to remove that image. And then I'm going to go into my hard drive and start pulling in some other tokens. So I got to go dig in my computer and look for my Bernardo Hasselman folder, because I have a folder full of his tokens. So I have a storage drive that I put all my tokens from different things that I use, and try not to clutter up my hard drive too much. But I have a downloads backup folder, and in here is a whole bunch of role-playing game assets. So I'm going to look for Bernardo, because I know I gotta have a folder in here. Yeah, so here's his tokens. And then when I go in here, I'll have access to a whole bunch. So here's the bugbear, so we might as well grab that while I can find him. They have so many tokens. So I'm going to change the portrait image. And I don't know if you guys saw this. This is hilarious. This is my Hallwinter and basically Daryl Hall and John Oates, which is Hallwinter and Gundren Rockseeker. So we won't be using that. But that was something I was playing around with for a poster. So Hallwinter and Oates. DM hint, if you have line of sight, they may get dropped into line of sight that you don't want. Yeah, okay. So yes, we have Daryl Hall and John Oates, or we would call them Hallwinter and Gundren Rockseeker. Okay, so change the portrait image, so we don't want that. Let me see if I stored any in here. Some Bernardo tokens. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, wait a minute. What happened? Oh, I'm in the wrong Wrong folder. Okay, so storage. See, this is the part of the video that people, this sucks. You're just fumbling around on your hard drive. I don't have time for this crap. But if you want to learn how to do it, stick around. So basically, I have a backup folder for my downloads, and I have so much crap in there that I don't even have it as part of my regular junk because I don't want to deal with it. Why is it not selecting? Oh, it's because I'm trying to select an image. I got it. Alright, so instead of doing it that way, let me see if it'll let me just drag it on there like I did with that photo. Well. Yeah, as the background. Okay, so this is the token. Obviously, I can make it smaller. So if I mouse wheel back a little, I could do that. And that looks pretty good for scale. I mean, but it gets cut off, so you have to be careful. That's why I made this square a little bit bigger, so I gotta shrink that a little bit. So as long as you keep the goblin inside or whatever creature you're using inside this token, it won't get cut off. So it has a hard cutoff on the edge here. So if I wanted to avoid that, I can actually change this background base to 200 and then make the token a little bit bigger, but then that makes the square bigger. So I don't really want to do that either. So I want to go probably as far to the margins as I can. And I don't remember if bugbears are considered large or not. I have to check that out, because that makes a difference too. So if you're going to have a large creature, you want that base to be at least 200. So let me double click on Clark here and see what his size. It might still be, yeah, it's medium, so I'll leave him as medium. Alright, so basically this is going to be Clark's token. And now that I have this set, I can export this, and the opacity is pretty much where I want it. It's not super dark or anything, and it's visible, because if you have it too thick and visible, then it's like that. So I want a little bit of opacity to it, so that way you can see the ground underneath it. And then you get to see the edge around here, so that'll make it stand out a little bit when you're playing. So it's important to get the balance between the opacity and the edges figured out. And then I don't see any cutoff here from his token, so I think we're good to go. So when you hit File, and you can save this as, and then this says Dwarven Cleric, so I don't want that. And you want to save this in a folder, so I'll just go ahead and make a new folder. And I'll just call this Hallwinter and Rockseeker, Hall and Oats. It'll help if I spelled it correctly. And now I'm going to call this Clark. Probably Bugbear, just in case I want to use it somewhere else. So Bugbear Clark is basically what I'm calling the token, and I'm saving it in this folder. So once I've done that, I'll move on to the next token. So I'm going to replace this with a goblin. So I want to go back into my... Why did I close that folder? That was stupid. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my storage drive again, and go back to my download backup, and go to the Bernardo's folder. Alright, so here I have hobgoblins and goblins and all kinds of stuff. So let me search for goblins, see if what it comes up with. I know there's a bunch of them. Let's see, goblin. So I wanted two different types. Okay, so there's a bunch of them in here. So here's one with like a scythe. Here's one with like a bombing thing. Here's a Swordmaster one, so I'll use that one for the the guys that are going to be, you know, basically using their swords more than their bows. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that with this. So if I go to the portrait options, I can remove the portrait image, and I'm going to go into back to the folder and drag that goblin over, because that's the one I want to use for the sword wielding ones. So if I take this and drag this on, okay. So that's a goblin swordmaster. It doesn't quite fit the description, but it's good enough. And like I said, you want to have the token centered and make sure it's not reaching outside of the edge of the token. So I think that's about right. And then you know, have it centered as best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then you can actually make the portrait opacity too, but I'm not going to mess with that. But I want to mess with the overlay opacity. Yeah, so that's right. I'll just leave it there like the other one. So again, I'll just hit File, Save As, and then this one will be called Goblin Swordsman or Scimitar. So Goblin Scimitar, just so I know what the heck it is. So there's that. And now I want to change that one out for one with a bow. I'm pretty sure I have one with archer. So I can remove the background image. Wait. No, it's the portrait. Remove portrait image. Okay. So I need to find a goblin that has archery, and I know there is one. I just don't see it right now. So here's some mounted ones. Here's one with a dagger. Let me try archer. Okay, that's a human archer. So I know that there's some archers in here somewhere. So in Fantasy Grounds itself, I have a bunch of tokens in that folder. But I want to use the ones that are not in Fantasy Grounds just so they're separate. And in the downloads backup folder, I have so many items that it's hard to find them anymore, because I just have way too much crap. I got to go through every single one of these things and figure out what's what. But so we have the Bernardo Hasselman tokens. I had them divided into folders, so I wonder if that's still a thing or not, because I had them really nicely organized. Yeah, not so sure I did that on this particular group here, but if I, you know, done my due diligence before the show, I'd actually have all these tokens gathered up. But I'm going to show you what not to do, basically. So you want to have all this stuff done before you start making your content. So I'm going to go back to the downloads folder, and then I'm going to look for what was it that I was using. I know I had one called Goblinoids. Yeah, I probably did that with, if I go with Goblin, that's really, you know, that's going to really put a, oh, here we go. This is what I was looking for. Alright, so this is the Goblinoid folder. Now this has a bunch of tokens that are from other artists, so I don't necessarily want to use these, but if I have to, I can pull out one for an archer, you know, if needed. But I'd rather use the ones from Bernardo. So these are all different kinds of goblinoid creatures that I've collected throughout the last few years. So these are definitely not something I'm going to use, but as you can see, there's some archers in here that I might end up using. Or I might go in and modify it to make it look like it's carrying a bow. So there's all kinds of things you can do. So let me see. If I really wanted to, I can just say forget it, I don't need one. But I kind of want the archery in there. So if I go to, let's see, Fantasy Grounds, and if you have an assets folder already, you go to your assets, and then you go to your tokens folder actually, and then data is where all of your tokens should be stored on the upper level. And then I have a folder called Bernardo's Tokens. And if I click on that, there is a folder called Goblinkin. See, I didn't even call it the right thing. And then these are all the goblins, and what do you know? There is a archer in here, the one I was looking for. So if I click on this folder, and then I go to Fantasy Grounds, and then this is the upper level, not the campaign level, but in the upper level, and then go to tokens, and then I'll look at Bernardo's tokens here, and then goblins. So where is that? Goblinkin. And once I've done that, then I can take this image and drag and drop it onto the token tool. So if I go like this and I move this aside and I drag this token, now I have an archer. So I did have them organized, but they're all organized in Fantasy Grounds. I was trying to avoid that, but nonetheless, I made more work than it was worth. So here's a Goblinoid. I'm going to set him back a little so that we can extend his bow out. I want to make sure that his elbow and the tip of the arrow are not sticking out of the frame here. So if you can look up here, your preview, that looks about right. So there we go. Now I'm going to save it. So File, Save As, and I'm going to click on Scimitar Goblin, but then I'm going to change it to Bow or Archer. So there's the archer. So we have this guy, and now I want to find, that's not the right folder. So I want to find the, what is this? Oh, I need to find a wolf. So go back to Bernardo's tokens. And I did have one called animals, but I don't know if I still have it that way or not. Creature monsters, let's see what this is. No. So let me see if you use the search in here, I don't know if it's going to search the whole damn Fantasy Grounds. Oh wait, there's animal companions and such. Okay, that's a bear and a lion. We don't want that. So we need to have Bernardo's tokens. And let's see. I know there's a mixed bag. Here we go. Yeah, so I need to navigate to this folder once this loads. So yeah, so I'm going to go back to the asset folder again, and I didn't need to close that out, but basically go back to tokens, and then there's Bernardo, and then there's the way to have this set up. So nature bug folk, is it in there? Nope, but this would have stuff like that in there, like bugs and those sort of things. So let me see if there's a wolf or something. I don't know if he made a wolf. I mean, he may not have. So there's a wolf barbarian. Alright, so maybe he didn't make a wolf. So if that's not a problem, so I just go back to tokens. And I know I have animal companions and wild shapes. I have probably one of these under. Is it Winter World might have some. Now those are cat creatures, so that wouldn't work. Actually, I can use the wolf that I was going to, Howler Wolf. I can use that. This is pretty cool. So I'll take the Howler Wolf and use that as my token because it looks good anyways, and that's something I paid for, so I want to use it. So let's bring up the token tool. Let's remove the portrait. And let's bring the wolf up. So we're going to go ahead and grab this wolf here and drag and drop it onto the token tool. And then I'm going to leave it the way it is and try to stretch it. There we go. So that's going to be our wolf token. And I like the angle it's in. It looks pretty cool. So that's a cool looking wolf. So I'm going to go ahead and take that and save it. So I'm going to go to Save As, and this will be Clark's wolves. Wolf of Clarg. Okay, so that's what I'm changing it to, so I know what that is. Okay, so that's the tokens themselves. So I go ahead and close that. Now, when you want to add them to your campaign, once you've gone into your directories here, I need to go back up to the main directory. Now I need to open up the folder that goes with this campaign. So if you click on folder, remember I had this NPC subfolder, so if I double click there, this is where I want to put the tokens that I just made. And those are in my downloads folder, so I know where those are at. So if I click on here and then go through here, it's got to refresh. I don't know why the heck happened here. So where did those end up saving if they didn't save there? Let's go with Clarg. I know we called him Clarg, so where was this last at? Ah, it's in oh, that's right, the subfolder. Okay. Anyway, so there's the folder. And what I'm going to do is copy and paste these guys. See, this is why you have to be organized, or it's going to take you forever. If you do all this up front before you create content, it's a lot quicker. But anyways, you got to see some of the struggle to understand what it takes. So now that you have that, I'm going to take these guys, and they're in the Fantasy Grounds folder now. So you got to hit refresh or they don't show up. So I'll go ahead and close this, or minimize it, not close it, and refresh, and it should. Now there's a campaign folder. You double click this, there's my NPC subfolder, and then there's my tokens. So you can do this a couple different ways. So you can change the stat blocks if you want to make custom stat blocks, which I might. You go and go in here and unlock it and replace the token. Then when you add it, it'll always be the same tokens. But if you want to leave the base tokens the way they are and only do it for the encounter, you can do that. So I'm going to replace this token with this one. So if you unlock this encounter and you take Clarg here and drag and drop it over the main master token, it'll update that and it'll change it. And then here's the archers. Here are the scimitar wielding ones. And then here are the wolves. So you have, now you essentially have different tokens, and they're custom and they don't look so hokey. And I'm going to remove all of these off the combat tracker because they need to be updated. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this delete button and then delete only foes. Now I'm going to refresh this and unlock it. And then I'm going to send this to the combat tracker again. And now they all have the changed tokens. Now I want to see what they look like on the map or on the image. Because if it sucks, then I need to change that. So I'm going to go to the Tribord Trail again, and let's see what they look like. So I'm going to drag them over again, and then reveal them. Oh yeah, that looks a lot better. So here's the two scimitar wielding ones. Here are Clarg's wolves, which look really good. And then here's Clarg himself. So this, at the minimum, I would break this up into 2 encounters. So instead of having this Mondo encounter here, I would probably break these up into 2. So what you can do to make this simpler, this process, since I've already have one built, is if I go into my encounters area, I can take this Tribord Trail Assault, make a copy of it, and the copy, I will call this Tribord Trail Assault Boss or something like that, or Wave 2. We'll say Wave 2. So that way the game masters realize that it's supposed to be in waves. So Wave 2, and then I'm just going to delete the ones I don't want on here, and I'll do the same on that one. So if I right click on here, I'm going to get rid of the goblins and just leave these guys, and then hit the refresh up here. And now it's just Clarg and his wolves. And I'll go ahead and bookmark that so I don't lose it. And then for this encounter, I'm going to take off Clarg and the pets and refresh it and call this Wave 1. And I'll bookmark this too. So now I have two of them. So again, I got to go back to the combat tracker and remove these. Because when you make changes like that, you have to change everything. Just change one of the side or the other. Now wave 1, send that over. I would probably let this happen for maybe up to 3 rounds, or roll a d4. And then whatever the number is, the result would be what you would use to determine when Clark shows up. So it's after 1 round. So after 1 round goes off, then Clark and the wolves show up. So that's how I would handle that. It makes it a lot simpler and easier to run, and it doesn't kill your combat tracker. So yeah, there's Clark and them. Then when you want to put them on the map, you just drag all of them over at once, and there we go. So that is basically just kind of setting up an encounter, building the tokens for it, kind of get an idea of what they look like, and then of course I want to reveal them. Yeah, that looks really good. So I would probably have the 3 dogs probably coming out like this when they start for placement, because you can place all these ahead of time. So if I wanted to place these in waves, what I'm going to do is right click, and I'm going to delete all the tokens. So if you right click on any token, delete token, I'm going to delete all of them. And what I'm going to do is pre-place them. So that's wave 1. That's wave 1. So I want to get rid of one of these pins. I don't need it. Okay. So here's the encounters, these little pins. Your players can't see those. But I'm going to go ahead and wave 1. I'm going to do like the ambush did. So I'm going to put an archer here. Put one over here probably. And then a couple melee guys down in here. These are the tougher ones. And as you see, as I place them, it puts a check mark. So those are placed. Once I close this, they'll disappear, but I'll leave that up so I can place the next group, and then I'll close it. So now the second wave is going to be Clark. One of his wolves is going to run out ahead, and then the other 2 are like his bodyguards, so they kind of stay nearby. So they'll probably be like this, and then Clark himself will probably be, in the back somewhere, kind of shouting commands. And if you want him to look a little bigger, so you can see his token is a little bit small, so if you hold the control key and mouse forward when you have a token selected, you could definitely make it look like he's a little bit bigger in scale. Same thing with these goblins. If you're having a hard time seeing them, you can make that square fit into that pocket there, and it'll look a little bit better on screen, so that when you're showing this in combat and such, they show up a little bit better. There we go. So that's better, so you can actually see the tokens better. And then what I would do is, if you wanted to show this on a stream, you can actually enlarge that so that the image is more part of the background, or if you conversely, you can even go to full screen, and then you still have the combat tracker available to you and run everything out of the combat tracker. So that's handy too. And then your dice are down here. So once you've placed those and you're ready to go, you can basically run the encounter. And so I got to delete those ones off of here because I had them on there before. So if you delete all non-friendlies, those. Okay, so they're placed. So if I bring that one up, wave 1, I click this down arrow, and they are on the map now. They're not visible, but they're on the map. And then I can click on wave 2 after the first round, where we determined that Clark would show up after the first round. So click on that, and there goes Clark, and down. So there he goes, and then when they're all visible, or when they're ready to fight, you can turn on the eyeball on the combat tracker. So now you have this big Herkin map that you can use and show instead of just the compressed view. So now you can run this whole combat here if you want and show what it looks like. So that's kind of cool. So that's basically, you know, the encounter part of this. So basically, if you open a map or image on the DM side, is it automatic? No, it's not. You have to share it. It's one of the things that you'll learn when you use Fantasy Grounds is you have to right-click on the image on the top left corner, and then you will basically you will be able to share the image. Once it's shared, yes. If they still have the shortcut, or if their tokens are on a map or something, it'll pull that up depending on what you're going to be doing. So while this is loading, if there's any questions other than that, I'm willing to answer. You could do the encounter as the goblins as the green guys and the Rockseeker guys as the red. Yeah, totally. You can take in reverse good and evil there. That might be different to run for Fantasy Grounds. Go with your 1.5 million image folder. Yeah, you got that right. I got so many damn images in there, it's ridiculous. And it's all fantasy stuff too. A little bit of sci-fi, cyberpunk stuff, but mostly fantasy, D&D stuff. Like the last. Can you show how to share it? Yeah, no problem. It won't show you what the players see, but it'll show you basically how to share the image. This is something we teach, Sakib, if you can ever get into one of our DM classes. I know they're too late for you, but or too early, but we do show that in those classes and in other videos. So we have other videos that we share with the community that has those type of things in them, but I'll show you once this comes back up. So yeah, so we're taking some of the lore from Lost Mine of Phandelver and changing it into more of a usable format to build up to the adventure, to get your mind wrapped around the setting and the characters that are involved. Even the horses. I mean, Drake and I were talking about horses dying and stuff, so that's another thing I forgot is I need to make tokens for the horses. I'll probably just use a couple generic tokens on those. I'm not going to get too elaborate, but those will be top-down, so I have 3D horses. And then I might make it tokens for the dead horses, just so I have them. I won't use them in the encounter necessarily until the end, but that'll be one of the laments there is that the horse is dying. Okay, so in order to share an image, such as the one I was working on, this is the Tribord Trail. And you can see it has a little pen here, which means that it's been edited, which means I've messed around with it. So this image right here, right now it's not visible to the party, but if you click on or right-click on the top left corner, you can even right-click somewhere on the map and click sharing, and then you can stop sharing it or you can share the record with your. Once you do that, on the bottom left corner, it'll show you who's viewing the photo. And then when you want to stop sharing it, there's this little letter P here. So if this is a map or an image that doesn't need to be displayed anymore, you want to click that, and that will clear the memory out and the image share. So like on a picture like this, if you're going to share this to your friends, by right-clicking, click sharing, and then share record. Once you've shared that, and they're done looking at it, they don't need it the whole adventure. So you just unclick this in this list here of all the images that you share. There'll be a little letter P next to it. And if you want to sort out just the images that you've shared, you can click all, and it will display the ones that are shared. And I didn't show anything because I didn't have any shared at the time, but that's how you share an image in Fantasy Grounds. And it doesn't have to be just an image. It can be a story entry. It could be a lot of things, but you want to try to keep it to images or notes or story stuff. You don't want to share. The tokens cannot be shared yet, so it's something you can't do. Yeah, you know what? That is something we have to work on. So I'll talk to what's his name? I'll talk to our site administrators and get your, if you give us your IP address, we can allow that. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. We've done it before. We've had people from Russia and China come that couldn't get on, and we've talked to them. We know they're real people. They're not hackers or whatever. So we can get you figured out. If we need to, we'll set up a special class for you. Okay, so the table's back up. Now back to the story part of it. So basically for this is like the beginning. It's like 00.00. So the image that I use for this background, I have my own group for those. So this is called, let's see, The Fall of Sildar and Hallwinter. So where did that go? That's Sidekicks. Fellowship of... Yeah, I want to show you guys that stuff too, because that's kind of cool that someone made that. What the heck did I do with that folder? This is the Image and Maps folder. Huh. Anyway, so I'd have a folder with that image in there, this one, and link it. So let me go back to that. See, Images and Maps. Oh, okay. So do I have any that are uncategorized? Yeah, so I didn't make a group yet. So to make a group, click on the plus button, or excuse me, that's to create a new image. Up here on top, where the group is, I'm going to click this plus button, and that creates a thing called Group 1, which is your new category. Then you click Edit, and I'm going to call this the Sildar and... Actually, it's Hallwinter and Rockseeker, which is their last name. Hallwinter and Rockseeker's Fall. So this is when they actually get captured. Now, when you create an image record, first of all, I'm going to go back to the Assets folder. And then I want to go to the campaign folder in this case, in Images, because that's where that image is. And if I double click it, you get a preview image. You can stretch it out a little bit if you want to see it. And I've used it for the background, so I clicked on Set Decal Background, so that's what this image is back here. But if you want to put it in your own group, you make the group first, you select the group, and then you click Create Image Record. And what it does is it actually brings up this as an actual image that you can share and show amongst your group if you want. So this is kind of like the cover, I guess. So I don't have to worry about that. But when you have this in here, you can drag and drop this into your story. So this would be embedded if you made a reference manual. This image, if you do it right, it can be shown. Provided you know what you're doing. But you have to do it in Classic right now because there's not a really good reference manual maker. So if you're going to use that older one, you have to build all this content in Classic first and then use it in Fantasy Grounds after that. But this is a image that you might want to share. And then if you click the arrows, this is getting into the Rockseekers. And then we're talking about the Goblinoids. We set up the encounter. And the next step would be in my story entries, I'm going to go ahead and add another group or another story entry. So I do have a group for this. So this is called, what is this? Hallwinter and Rockseeker. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus button. And what I normally do is, now in this case it's 00.03. And this is going to be like an appendix in a way, so that's good that I made it like this. And then I'm going to take and add some lore about Sildar. So without even having the module, I have the Lost Mine Defend Over module loaded in case, but I'm going to look up Sildar Hallwinter and some of his lore. So if you go there, there's some images of him, and then there's some lore online that you can read about. It depends on where you go, but I'm going to go to the Forgotten Realms wiki. That's usually pretty pretty reliable. And then he's a retired cavalry, Griffin cavalry of Waterdeep, so that's interesting. So he'd have to at least be 3rd level if he's a veteran. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy that information and put that into the story entry. And then I'm going to put the title is going to be Sildar Hallwinter. And see, the Griffin cavalry is I'll just put that for now. The Griffin cavalry is part of the lore in the Forgotten Realms. And then you have his description. So he's kind-hearted. He's 50 years old. He's getting up there in age. So this is his description. So I'm going to take that and add that in here like this, and hit the tab key. You can also use Notepad++ if you want to format that. This stuff isn't too bad, so I'm not worried about that. But you can strip out all this extra stuff a lot quicker if you want. But this is just showing you that you can make your own story entries. You don't have to use the stuff that you get out of the modules. And if you do enough research, you can probably almost make your own module. So this is basically a way to kind of clean this up. And I'm going to use his name again. So if I put an extra space in there, and then I'm going to hit Control-2 and make a header. So this is just a kind of a way for me to build the lore. So when I'm building the characters, I have something to go on. And I'm going to format it, make it look nice, and kind of make this like an appendix. Can you share? Oh, okay. Maybe an old griffin that he was mean to come by and kill the horses. I was thinking about that griffin thing. What I would really like to do is find a banner that would be like the griffin, like their heraldry. Let's see. So I want to copy. So he likes the Stonehill Inn. I have something for that too. Okay, so old Toblin there that runs that place. So here's some history or lore, and then I'm going to strip out any unwanted text that I don't want here. So if you highlight this text and then you hit Control-J, you can get rid of some of the formatting if it's it's there. But I think this is good because it's just about the history of how he... So it says he set off to Phandalin from Neverwinter. So he started in Neverwinter for sure. Who had recently discovered the Wave Echo Cave. So he was supposed to be an escort for these people. Sildar has his own reasons for visiting Phandalin and wished to find out what was happening with his fellow agent of the Lord's Alliance, Ilarno Albrecht. He also wanted to help Gundren and his brothers reopen the mine, as well as establish Phandalin as a place of prosperity, as it once was. However, on the way, he was ambushed and captured by the Kragmaw tribe, and he was, I found a typo, was taken to the Kragmaw hideout. So, and he was watched over by Ymik. So Hallwinter's equipment was stripped from him and sent to Kragmaw Castle. So what's cool about that is, one, we can link his stat block, his basic stat block from here. So if we go to NPCs, I have different iterations of them basically, but I have several source books open, and if you go to the library here that I have, if you look down this list, I have the Fellowship of Phandalin, Sidekicks of Phandalin, which are DM's Guild products, and then I have Monster Loot Mines of Phandelver. So all these kind of go hand in hand with the content. So I might take a look at those and make copies. So there's the Sidekicks, and then if you go to NPCs, it has Milk, and it has Sildar here as a NPC, and then it shows his proficiencies and stuff, and then it has Gundren Rockseeker. Or if you want to look in your, all throughout your content, I can just type in Gundren. And I have two different ones. I have the official one and then the one that came from that Sidekicks. So I think I'm going to use the official one. But before I do that, if you're going to borrow anything from another book, you want to make a copy of it if you can help it. So now this Gundren is just a copy. He's not part of any book. So there's no dependency on the actual content. So if I go to my story entry where Sildar is in Gundren, I could link that. So let me look for Sildar. So Sildar has two stat blocks. He has one where he's wounded and then one where he's normal. So I'm going to make copies of those. And now Sildar, I'm going to link him to here. And then I'm going to take his wounded one also and link it here. Oops, wrong place. So here's the wounded copy. So now he's basically, I have his stat block there, so I have something to build on. And then I have all this lore. And then if you open up the actual NPC stat block, it gives you his backstory. So in his notes for his backstory, we can add that to this. So it says that, so I'm going to unlock this and I'm going to copy this data. And that's his description. This is his base. So I want to put it probably here. Because this talks about, he's a retired knight. This is a retired soldier. So which one is it? So I'll just say, I'll just put this in the same area and reword it. Sildar is, instead of was, a tired knight from the Calvin Griffin. I'll say Sildar is I'll say Sildar is retired. Is a retired soldier and he is retired and a sellsword now, who hails from the city of Neverwinter. He is a loyal member of the Lord's Alliance, a political organization that unites the various, I see this space missing, free cities and towns of the north. So he's basically kind of like a liberator type. So there's that. And you can get into this griffin thing. I mean, we can find a griffin and potentially link it here so we have it for later. So if I want to, I just come down and add another entry, go to the NPCs, and let's see if we can find a griffin. I mean, he may not have it in his adventures, but if we want to use it, that'd be really cool. So again, make a copy, and then I'll drag and drop it from here to here, and highlight the NPC part of it. And now we have the stat block of a griffin, just in case you want to use it at some point. Yep, it has a stat block, has the image, and oh, they eat horses. So yeah, Drake, I get what you're saying now. So yeah, they like to eat horses, so maybe that's not a good idea. But they can be trained from an egg to serve as a mount. So they may be more, a little less aggressive towards horses, but they still want to eat them. They probably won't eat dead ones. They want to perch high up in the rocks and trees and pick them up and drop them. And then they'll tear them up when they land on the ground. Yeah, so that's a griffin. And now I want to look at some stuff that has to deal with his affiliation with that political alliance. So let's take a look at the Lord's Alliance and let's see what that gives us. So yes, it's a crown. and that's their symbol. And it is basically a partnership of a lot of different factions. Oh yeah, see, there's a lot to it. So I want this lore because I want to know, you know, what his affiliation is with this political party. So I'm going to make a new group here. I'm going to call this politics, basically. We don't talk politics on here, but in the game there's lots of politics. So politics, which means many blood-sucking insects, if you guys, which sounds about right. So politics, or more than one tick, is basically where I'm going to paste this. And looks like, let's get rid of a couple of these little footnote thingies here. So I want to know a little bit about his political affiliations because it may motivate him to do other things. And it does state in there that he's got more than one reason to go to Phandalin. He's looking for his cohort. It's a wizard, I guess. And it talks about the alliance itself, like how it became. And it even will give you some like places where they operate. So I want to look at that too. It looks like these are the main towns and cities. Golden Fields, yep. So this would be something you'd want to know, potentially, of where they are actually part. This is not a complete list, so I think that Phandalin is on the short list to become part of that alliance. So I'll go ahead and add this. Now this has a different kind of formatting to it. So basically what I would do is make this bold. And then this is just the, you know, the information about it. And then I'm going to get rid of all this extra numbers. And see, if I was using Notepad+, this would go a lot faster, but not everyone knows how to use that tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and just do it manually in Fantasy Grounds. It takes a little longer. But you can see, you can kind of go through here and kind of clean this up a little bit so you don't have a bunch of garbage in here. Yeah, so there's a lot of different stuff in here that needs to go. Look at extra brackets and that sort of thing. These are the references on the page itself. That's what deleting these, because I don't put in the reference notes for the lore that comes from the wiki pages. I had a plugin that used to take all this wiki pages and convert it to text. That was really quick. It was like a text file, and you can just easily copy and paste it without the images, of course. So these are all the cities, and if you want to, you can highlight this. I'm going to right click on it and click on paragraph type, and then you can do this bulleted list. And then what I do to make this quicker is I just backspace it and hit enter, and that'll start that process of creating these as, or you can just highlight them. And I think it's Control 3. I don't remember. No. Oops. It's Control 5. Nope. Control 4. I always forget that one, because I don't use it very often. Control 4. So you can do it this way too to make it easier on you. So this is like a bulleted list of places that are under the influence or participating in the Lord's Alliance. So I think that maybe that they were trying to get Phandalin as a part of the membership of this. And I think with the guy dying, the Iarno guy, I think that kind of put a kibosh on their operation. So that could be one of the reasons why they have him in there, is to make sure that that happens. And with the Iarno gone, it's kind of their representative. So they're sending old Sildar down there. What the hell's going on? So that's important to know, because later on if you continue the adventure and you want to stay in this region, you have plenty of lore to go on. So this is just kind of some extras. You don't really have to do all this stuff, but this is important in the respects to the game, because you're going to have lots of things that you want to look at. So Sildar's here, and then since he has a political affiliation, I went ahead and did a little research on it, and it's quite a bit actually. Gives you an idea of what to look forward to in some of the games. Hey, aloha, Seth. How you doing? Yeah, maybe an old griffin that he was mean. Yeah. Yep. So this is just some of the lore stuff that I'm digging up for a show that I want to do. Drake has decided he wants to be the goblins in this case, which is kind of cool. It's fun to play the monsters. That's what I want to do when people ask me to play in their game. I want to play the bad guy. I don't want to always play this heroes. I want to run turn the bad guy into a stat block for me. I can run as a character. Even if it's just an NPC, I could still kind of run it. But I would make it a character if it's possible. And then I would take and basically just use it as a way to interface and engage with the players. He'd give me an idea of what I should know about what's been going on in the adventure, and then I would look at my lair or where I'm going to ambush them, and I would take that information and use it against the parties during the adventure. So these are all the Alliance leaders, so that's kind of cool to know these names. So there's actually, I'll just leave it regular text. So these are the main leaders. So whoever was in charge, let's see, there's Mithril Hall, there's Amphil. So whoever would be in charge, this would have been Yarno's job. He would have been an Alliance member, probably the leader of that town of Phandalin. So it never really got to that point, I guess, because something happened, I don't know, during the adventure, I believe. But this is just basically some lore to kind of get you, excited about the adventure. And so if you had to use this artwork, you could totally use this. So if I wanted to, I can, put it in a program and utilize this as a, some sort of backdrop. Let me see if I have Lord's Alliance. I might have it, or it might be factions too. There's Tent of the Lord's Alliance. So if you have a Forgotten Realms factions thing, you could, there's Dwarven factions, a guide to the factions. So Adventures League has a really good handle on factions. So if you ever want to read about them, you have the Harpers, you have the Emerald Enclave, the Order. Here's the Lord's Alliance. That's their symbol there. So if you wanted to look at this, you can copy and paste this data, or just take a screenshot of it, or however you want to do it. And you would take and put this information in here if you want. And see, right now it's kind of goofed up. You have all these. That actually didn't paste too bad, but sometimes when you do that, it gives you this really awful formatting. So it actually kept a lot of that formatting, which is amazing. Because normally you have to screw around with it. So here's the ranks, and then there's the member traits. So Drake, I don't remember it ever carrying over this formatting, so that's amazing. Is that something new in Fantasy Grounds? Because I've never had to. I've had to always mess around with it. It pasted over like butter. I mean, I don't know if you're still there, but that's pretty sweet. That means I didn't have to do a ton of formatting, which is tons of save time. Maybe they allowed you to import those. I don't remember if that was a thing or not before. But that's a cool way to do it. You can drag and drop windows on their portrait. Yes, exactly. Yep. All you'd have to do, Sakib, is if someone's connected to your table, you just drag, like if you wanted to share the sheet I'm working on, you just drag this up to one of their portraits. It's connected on the top left, and it will share that document with the players. So if it's an image or, you know, a little note or something, you can drag and drop that token on any of your players that are connected, and only they would see it at that time. And you can do that with maps and all kinds of things. So that's how you do that. This is why I keep all of my lore contained on what's WA. World Anvil. Got it. Yep. Yep. I heard that before. A lot of people use those tools to keep all their stuff straight. Okay, so now we know about the Lord's Alliance. We know that he may have had access to a griffin, so I put that in here. And then, you know, you get kind of the political view here of what's going on. But we know who the leaders are, what their goals are. They're usually neutral or lawful alignments, militants, fighters, sorcerers, and they do have traits and such. Their goals is ensure the safety and prosperities of cities across the realms, basically. Maintain a strong coalition against forces of disorder. Proactively eliminate threats to established powers, to the established powers. Bring honor and glory to one's leaders and one's homeland. So they're just kind of like protectors and such. They're almost like a knightly order. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm going to be using for lore and background for Sildar. And then the Rockseekers, I kind of wanted to know like a little bit more about their clan. I'm not sure what the Rockseeker clan was like, or if there is even any lore about it. But if there's no lore about their backdrop, since they're located in, you know, basically the Sword Coast, I'm thinking about them being a member or a relative to some of the dwarves that used to live there in the area long ago. And that was the Gauntlgrim. So they may be related to somebody who had lived in Gauntlgrim. And if I remember right, some of my random searches I did, the dwarves of Gauntlgrim, when the place was taken over, they had scattered, and some of them went to the Sword Mountains. So let's see if I can pull up a map here of the actual area. So I want to go to, and I'll bring in my own map so I don't have to deal with being locked out of the map. But do you have maps that come with the books? So here's the Lost Mine of Phandelver maps. And then there's one, I believe there's one, yeah, here's the Sword Coast one. So here's a higher resolution Sword Coast map. Yeah, so you have this region here. And I believe that Gauntlgrim, see there's Houghton now. So Gauntlgrim was up in here somewhere. And the mountains, the crags basically, are one mountain range, and then the Sword Mountains. So what they said is when Gauntlgrim disappeared, most of the dwarves went to the Sword Mountains, and they kind of scattered around the area. So they might be related to those to that ancient dwarven area. So it's over in here somewhere is where Gauntlgrim is. So I think they would probably be a part of that clan, if anything. And then these rivers and stuff are part of part of the scene. But I imagine that Thunder Tree was ruined when Mount Hotnow blew up, and then all the Neverwinter was destroyed because of it. They said a pyroclastic flow came through, so when it blew up, it went the direction of Neverwinter. It's probably the time of year when the mountain erupted. There was a wind pattern that was not favorable to those who lived in Neverwinter, so this eruption destroyed the town at least 30 to 40, 50 years before Phandalin. So there was some kind of Fallout and Aftermath. But I'm thinking that the Rockseekers may have been relatives of the people that fled that initial shock before Gauntlgrim was destroyed. And Gauntlgrim has its own history, but that will be something I'm going to include in this Rockseeker trilogy. Because there's 3 brothers, and I'm going to have to build their characters and such, so that's going to be something, at least they're NPCs, so I'm going to need to know what's going on with that. And if I need to make up my own lore, I'm just going to say that they are basically a part of one of the clans that had fled from the cataclysm that happened in Gauntlgrim, and it may have been a former eruption. I don't remember what happened, but it was before this last eruption, though, so it's several thousand years before. But we'll see. Alright, so I guess that's going to be it for me. I'm going to end the stream. I think I've been going for a couple hours now, an hour and 40 minutes. People don't like long videos, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it. But basically all I was doing was showing you how to incorporate lore and build content and kind of get more involved with what you're working with and what you're running. It kind of helps with when you run the game that you have memories and stories to draw upon. That's just something something that we want to do with with when you're getting ready to set up to play a game. You definitely want to have more lore and more stuff to draw upon. So it's good to get into it and kind of make your own connections, but at the same time really look at what's out there. So if I do a search for the Rockseekers, I don't really think I'm going to find much other than the current stuff. So Rockseeker Brothers, I mean, it talks about, what do you know? But see, this could be someone else's interpretation, but I might go with it. So it says the Rockseeker Brothers are 3 dwarves who hail from the Rockseeker clan of Sorok. They are known in Andaria. See, I think someone just took this and so they used it for their own story. So that's cool. They did the same thing I'm doing, basically, is they took and used the basic lore, and then they put it in their own. But I do like this. It says that Gundren is a businessman and has a reputation as a shrewd and thrifty manager. Thardan is the most capable fighters, but he was sadly killed by the Black Spider's minions while he stood watch at the entrance of the mine. And then Nundro, a studious and competent engineer, he provides the technical know-how in any of the Rockseeker Brothers' business ventures in regards to mining and such. So you have the businessman, you have the muscle, and then you have the brain. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to steal that for sure. So I might not take the name of the clan, but definitely take some of this lore and kind of bend it to my will. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste it and put it in this list here of information. So this talks about the Gundren and his brothers. So I want to talk about the Rockseekers. So if I unlock this and then I come down to the next, could do another story entry, but I don't want to have 50,000 story entries either. So if I take this information here, I can basically reformat it, use it for whatever. I might take the some of the information from the place, that website. I may say the clan of, and then change that, and see they are known in Andaria. So no, it's not Andaria. It's going to be the Forgotten Realms, or it's the Sword Coast. So they are known in Neverwinter. For their various business ventures and their involvement in the Phandelver adventure campaign. Yep. So the Rockseekers are as follows. So they have a list here. So I can maybe put this in bold. And then again, I hit Control 4 after highlighting this text. and do the same thing, the rest of this. It kind of gives you a breakdown of what their affiliation is to each other as far as business goes. So there we go. We just got a little bit more lore. I don't know about the clan name yet, so I'm just going to erase that. Clan of question mark. I haven't figured that out yet. But someone obviously made up something about it. So there, you know, it's not a new endeavor for sure. So this is about Gundren. We already know about that. The Rockseeker Brothers. So here's another one where someone made it an obsidian portal. So it looks like they're mountain dwarves, so that's good. But someone was asking, he's simply a dwarf and doesn't mention what kind. So they tried to look up information about it. They couldn't find out, just being a dwarf. So Rockseeker might be an established dwarf surname in Forgotten Realms lore. So if there's any reference to that being mountain or hill dwarves, even if it's from another edition. But you know, they wanted something like that. But traditionally it says the dwarves have different accents. Mountain dwarves have Scottish accents, while hill dwarves have northern accents, so as to say like north of England, Yorkshire kind of thing, for their voices. It turns out that what kind of dwarves, they just pick one as they go. So they are arguably hill dwarves. so they're debating on whether they came in there or not is part of the plot. But the generated character is a hill dwarf, so it's fairly safe to assume that their cousins and cherished clan members are also. Nice catch on the pre-gen. I would consider that to be authoritative. So now we know they're hill dwarves. So, and that's because of the stat block. If you open up one of their stat blocks, it shows, you know, who's who. So speaking of that, let's see if there's any other. Let's see if we can find if anyone made the brothers, because if not, we have to do that. So let's go with Nundro. See if he's in here. Yep, someone made him. So that's good. So I'll make a copy of this. And then for Nundro's area here, I will put the link to his lore here. And that is basically how that goes. And then I want to see if Thardern is built. See, this will help me later when I go to look at these, and I'm going to get them tokens and stuff if necessary. So Thardern is the other brother. Yeah, so no one made Thardern yet. I spelled it right. Thardern. Yep. So no one made that one, but you know, at least we have something to go on. So that's cool. So anyways, that's what I'm basically going to divulge today. Once I get this dealt, I will put this on or upload it to the YouTube and put the descriptions in there. And also, once I get done with it, I'm going to do a show, like a puppet show kind of. Except for we'll be using miniatures, digital ones, or digital representations of the characters, and just kind of voice for them and kind of have fun with it. I think I'm going to tape it instead of doing it live, and then set it as a premiere or something like that. But I'm going to have all the lore, all the backstory, scripting, the whole 9 yards. So, Drake, if you want to be a goblin, you got to use your goblin voice. Seth, if you want to be one of the other goblins, you're welcome to. I know you like goblins, so you want to play a goblin, you're just the voice of it. But anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good afternoon, and I'll see you around.